So, um, I had this dream last night that I was giving a presentation.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I don't just mean like I was standing in front of a vague blur of people. It was incredibly specific. I was in a boardroom. The lighting was that really harsh fluorescent kind.
Right. The absolute worst lighting.
Exactly. And I was delivering this pitch. But here is the bizarre part. I completely nailed it.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the pacing of my speech was perfect. The audience was laughing at all the right moments. My voice didn't shake once. And when my alarm went off, I woke up feeling this undeniable physical surge of confidence.
Like it had actually happened.
Yes, the adrenaline was literally still in my system. And the thing is, today I actually have a very real, very high-stakes presentation to give.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Right. So it got me thinking as I was, making my coffee. Is that just a coincidence? Is my brain just nervously churning through my anxieties, kind of throwing random images at the wall? Or was I actually, like, literally practicing while I slept?
Well, the source material we're examining today suggests that your morning coffee revelation is entirely accurate.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I mean, you were not passively watching a movie your brain decided to play. You were working.
I was working while asleep. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a specific concept from the text that addresses this directly, and it describes the dreamer by saying, and I quote, "In dreams, you try out various solutions to problems. You test alternate actions. You are the dream art scientist in your own laboratory."
The dream art scientist in my own laboratory. I love that phrasing.
It's powerful, right?
It really is, because it implies agency. It implies that the 8 hours I spent unconscious last night were not just this biological void, but a period of highly productive, directed effort.
Yes.
And that brings us to the core of what we're unpacking today. We're taking a deep dive into a very specific, historically influential body of work known as the Seth material.
Which is such an incredible collection of texts.
It is. But for those listening who might be unfamiliar, this requires a bit of context, because the origin of this material challenges, well, a lot of modern sensibilities.
That's an understatement.
Right. We are pulling specifically from 3 texts today. That's Seth, Dreams and Projections of Consciousness, The Nature of Personal Reality, and Dreams, Evolution, and Value Fulfillment.
Great selections.
Now, these books were produced starting in the 1960s by an author named Jane Roberts. But Jane didn't write them in the traditional sense.
No, she didn't.
She went into a dissociated trance state and spoke for what she described as an energy personality essence that called itself Seth. And her husband, Robert Butts, sat across from her and basically transcribed every single word in shorthand.
Which naturally is the point where a lot of people might raise an eyebrow.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it challenges our fundamental understanding of consciousness, of authorship, and, reality itself.
Exactly. I know a segment of our audience is probably thinking, wait, we're analyzing channeled material from the 1960s.
It sounds a bit out there at first glance.
It does. But the reason we are doing this deep dive, the reason these texts have sold millions of copies and influenced major psychological and philosophical thinkers for decades, is because the psychological frameworks presented within them are just shockingly profound.
And internally consistent.
Yes. And most importantly, practically applicable. I mean, we aren't here to debate the metaphysics of channeling today. We're impartially looking at the data and the framework that Seth presents.
Exactly. We're just exploring the ideas themselves.
Right. And the mission for this discussion, for you listening right now, is to fundamentally reframe how you view sleep. We want to challenge the cultural assumption that sleep is merely a dormant state.
That it's just this biological necessity where your brain randomly fires off static to clean out the neurological pipes, so to speak.
Yeah. Instead, we're going to explore the mechanics of sleep as an active strategic training ground for your waking life.
And to understand why that reframe is even necessary, we really have to look at the cultural baggage we carry into the bedroom every night.
Oh, for sure.
Because we live in a society that tends to view sleep as a necessary evil, like it's viewed as lost productivity.
Right, like I'll sleep when I'm dead culture.
Exactly.
Well,
We think of the dreaming state as chaotic, unreasonable, and completely divorced from the rational, conscious direction of our waking hours.
just a bunch of random noise.
Yeah, and classical psychology has often reduced dreams to basically a garbage disposal system for waking anxieties, or, in more extreme interpretations, compared the dreaming state to controlled insanity.
Wow. Controlled insanity.
I know. We have erected this massive artificial wall between our waking consciousness and our sleeping consciousness. But the Seth material argues that this division is not only needless, but it's actively stunting our development.
How so?
Well, the assertion is that the dreaming psyche is entirely awake. It is alert, it is highly rational within its own environment, and it is working tirelessly on your behalf.
Okay, let's get under the hood of how this nightly training facility actually operates then.
Yeah.
Because if my dream about the presentation wasn't just my brain digesting the prep work I did yesterday, if it wasn't just a psychological echo of the past, what are the actual mechanics of what was happening?
So the material posits that your dream was a literal rehearsal for the future, taking place within what Seth calls a trial framework.
A trial framework.
Yes. And to grasp this, we have to look at how Seth defines time and reality. In this framework, reality is not a single straight line of time where events just happen one after another inevitably.
Right.
Instead, the inner self, which is the broader portion of your consciousness, is constantly scanning an infinite array of probable futures.
Okay, let me pause you there.
Sure.
When you say probable futures, are we talking about, like, the multiverse theory? Like, is there a physical universe where I gave the presentation perfectly and another physical universe where I tripped over the projector cord and ruined my entire career?
It's related to multiverse concepts, definitely, but Seth grounds it much more intimately in personal psychology.
Okay, how so?
The material suggests that every choice you make generates a new probable reality. So you're constantly standing at the center of infinite paths.
Right, branching out.
Exactly. Some paths are highly probable based on your current beliefs and habits, and others are highly improbable. Now, the conscious mind, your ego, can only focus on one physical event at a time.
Because otherwise we'd go crazy.
Precisely. It would be entirely overwhelmed if it had to consciously calculate the infinite variables of every possible choice. So your inner self takes on that workload.
Ah, I see.
It scans these probable realities and selects specific scenarios for your consciousness to practice. And it does this in the safe, consequence-free environment of the dream state.
So the dream state is essentially a high-fidelity simulation. It's like sandbox mode in a video game.
A sandbox mode is a very accurate analogy. In The Nature of Personal Reality, Seth details how this trial framework operates. It's a highly malleable, plastic environment.
Unlike physical reality.
Exactly. When you want to test an idea in the physical world, you have to contend with the slow, cumbersome laws of physical matter, space, and time.
Yeah, everything takes forever.
Right. If you want to see if a new chair design works, you have to buy the wood, cut it, assemble it, and then sit on it. It takes days or weeks. But the physics of the dream dimension operate entirely differently.
Because it's all mental.
Yes. Seth explains that in the dream state, thoughts and ideas are literally manufactured products.
Manufactured products, meaning they have actual substance, like they feel real.
They do. They appear immediately within that reality. They have form and mass within that dimension, but they change shape instantly based on your focus.
Oh, wow.
Because you're freed from the strict, heavy rules of physical time and space, your consciousness can move at incredible speeds.
That makes sense.
You can rummage through the probable days of the future to find precisely the data required to test a specific action. You're exploring probable actions and deciding upon the ones you actually want to physically materialize in your waking life.
You know, that reframes so many common human experiences.
It really does.
Like, it explains why professional athletes frequently report dreaming of their events. A gymnast might dream of running a specific floor routine flawlessly the night before the Olympics.
Yes, exactly.
Or someone might dream of an emotional reunion with an estranged family member. Or, going back to my morning, me dreaming of presenting to a boardroom.
Right, you were rehearsing.
Under this framework, I am not just having a wish fulfillment fantasy. I am quite literally training my consciousness for a desired outcome.
That is exactly what you're doing.
I mean, I am rendering the physics of the scenario, testing the emotional variables, the pacing, the audience reaction, all in a space where if I fail, I don't actually lose my job.
Right, you are testing the emotional and psychological variables. You're gathering data.
Like, how does it feel to stand in front of that room? Where does my anxiety spike?
Yes, and how do you recover from a stumbled word? The inner self runs the simulation so the ego can experience the emotional reality of the event without the physical risk.
Okay, but hold on. This is where I have to challenge the logic of this system.
Let's hear it.
If the entire point of this nightly training facility is to practice for desired outcomes, and if the inner self is so wise and in control of this rendering engine, Why on earth do we have nightmares?
Ah, the nightmare question.
Yeah, it feels like a massive design flaw. If I am the one programming the simulation to achieve, you know, value fulfillment, why would my inner self ever force me to rehearse something terrifying?
It seems counterintuitive, I know.
Very. Why wouldn't it just show me a peaceful, logical spreadsheet of my anxieties so I can resolve them calmly? Why would I dream about being chased by a monster, or losing all my teeth, or being trapped in a burning building? That doesn't seem like practicing for success. It seems like psychological torture.
Well, consider the alternative. If you only ever practiced ideal, pleasant scenarios, you would be entirely unequipped to handle the friction of physical reality.
I guess that's true.
The Seth material addresses the function of the nightmare directly, and it completely removes the idea that nightmares are a mistake or some kind of malfunction.
So they have a purpose.
A huge purpose. Nightmares serve an absolutely vital, highly regulated rehearsal function. They actually act as a form of self-administered shock therapy for the psyche.
Shock therapy. That, that implies something violent. Why would the psyche need violence?
Because it requires an intense intervention. The waking ego is incredibly stubborn.
Fair enough.
In waking life, we are heavily conditioned to repress our deep-seated fears, our traumas, and our natural aggression. We push it down because it's not socially acceptable to express it, or because it's simply too painful for the ego to look at directly.
Right, we just swallow it so we can get through the workday.
Exactly. But Seth emphasizes that these emotions are not just abstract concepts, they are actual energy. They have an electric actuality.
Electric actuality,
Mhm.
meaning they are real forces.
Yes. If you dam up that energy, if you refuse to acknowledge it, it blocks the natural flow of your vitality. It begins to manifest as neuroses, anxiety, or even physical tension.
So, because I refuse to deal with my anger at, say, a toxic boss while I'm awake, that anger just sits in my system, building pressure like a boiler with no release valve.
Exactly. And if that boiler bursts in waking life, the consequences are severe. You might explode at your boss, ruin your career, or damage a relationship.
Right, the real world has stakes.
The waking world has permanent physical consequences. So in the protected area of sleep, the inner self intervenes. It conjures up a nightmare.
So it creates the monster.
Yes. It creates a highly dramatic, terrifying scenario. Perhaps you are engaged in a life or death battle with a demon, or you're running for your life from an unseen threat. The monster isn't real, but the fear and the aggression you are allowed to feel are entirely real.
Oh, I see.
The nightmare forces you to face that repressed energy in a space where there are no real-world victims.
You're saying the nightmare isn't the problem, the nightmare is the treatment.
Exactly.
I get to experience the adrenaline, the fight or flight response, the total release of that pent-up aggression, but without ruining my physical life.
And the treatment is highly precise. The material states that the self is its own best therapist.
Wow.
It knows exactly how many shocks the psyche can take to its advantage. And the mechanism goes deeper than just psychological release. It's deeply physiological, too.
Physiological, like it affects the body directly.
Yes. We mentioned the electric actuality of thoughts. When you have a nightmare, it causes real physical reactions. Your heart rate spikes, you sweat, your breathing becomes shallow.
Yeah, waking up in a cold sweat.
Right. A nightmare mobilizes your physical resources. It fills your body with a rush of needed hormones, creating a state of acute stress that actually brings the physical organism's healing abilities into combat. It flushes the physiological system.
That makes incredible sense. You wake up shaken, your heart is pounding, you might be covered in sweat, but the pressure valve has been released.
The boiler didn't explode in the office.
Right. You survive the encounter in this simulation. And surviving the nightmare builds emotional resilience for waking life. You've already faced the worst-case emotional scenario.
Exactly. The material even makes the rather provocative claim that many severe physical illnesses are avoided entirely because we manage to work out the psychological blockages through the intense shock therapy of our nightmares.
That is mind-blowing.
The body doesn't have to manifest the illness because the mind has already processed the blocked energy.
Okay, so if the dream state is this powerful, if it is a trial framework where we can test probabilities, run simulations for upcoming events, and flesh out our deepest neuroses through controlled nightmares, the immediate question is, can we hijack the system?
What do you mean by hijack?
Like, can we consciously control it? If I want to get better at something in waking life, or if I want to solve a specific problem, can I deliberately tell the simulation what to load up?
You can. The texts outline a process known as dream incubation.
Dream incubation.
Yes. You have the ability to purposefully program your dreams to practice a skill, explore a dilemma, or work toward a specific outcome.
How does that work, though?
Well, because the ego, the conscious waking part of you that is usually so busy managing physical survival, is at rest, the deeper, vastly more creative parts of your identity can take over the processing.
The ego is out of the way.
Right. You can suggest a desired outcome or a question before you go to sleep, and your dreaming self will construct a highly complicated artistic drama to help you achieve it.
That is a massive paradigm shift. Yeah. It completely changes the act of going to bed.
It really does.
It turns your mattress into a hyper-advanced virtual reality simulator. But to really ground this, to show that this isn't just theoretical philosophy, we need to look at how the author of this material, Jane Roberts, actually used these techniques in the real world.
We definitely do.
Because her personal journey with dream rehearsal wasn't just about trying to give a better presentation. It was a matter of survival. It was harrowing.
Looking at Jane's life provides the necessary context for the gravity of these concepts. Jane was not some theorist sitting comfortably in an ivory tower philosophizing about the nature of reality.
No, she was in the trenches.
Very much so. She and her husband, Rob, were dealing with profound, exhausting physical and psychological challenges. During the period when dreams, evolution, and value fulfillment was being produced, Jane's physical reality was essentially collapsing.
Yeah, she was hospitalized for an extended period.
She was. She weighed roughly 82 pounds. She was dealing with a severely underactive thyroid rheumatoid arthritis that had left her almost entirely immobile, profound hearing loss, and dangerous bed sores from being unable to move.
We really need to emphasize the reality of that room. She is trapped in a hospital bed. Her body is failing her. She is dealing with sensory deprivation from the hearing loss, and she's in constant agonizing pain.
It's an unimaginable physical crisis.
It is the absolute definition of physical crisis. Most people in that situation would view sleep simply as an escape, just a way to turn off the suffering for a few hours.
Of course they would.
But the source text reveals that her dream life and her waking life were intimately intertwined during this period. She was using the dream state to actively navigate the terrifying probabilities of her physical illness.
She was using the laboratory.
Exactly.
The Seth material points out that prior to this hospitalization, Jane had developed a psychological structure that Seth referred to as a rigid, superhuman, sinful self-image.
What does that mean, exactly?
It was a deep-seated belief that she had to be perfect, that any flaw or weakness was a sin, and that she had to push herself relentlessly without ever asking for help to produce this massive body of work.
So she was incredibly hard on herself.
Incredibly. And Seth argued that this psychological rigidity literally encased her body in physical symptoms. Her physical immobility was the direct material manifestation of her psychological inability to be flexible.
Wow. Her ego was so unyielding that her joints became unyielding.
Yes. But in the hospital, faced with total physical helplessness, that superhuman image finally cracked. She was forced to accept help.
She had to surrender.
She was forced to be vulnerable, and in her dreams, her inner self immediately went to work on this new probability. While her physical body was trapped in the bed, she began having incredibly vivid dreams of walking, running, and dancing.
And based on what we just discussed about the trial framework, those weren't just sad, wish fulfillment fantasies of a woman who missed walking.
No, not at all. They were literal rehearsals.
Rehearsing mobility.
Yes. Her inner self was sending urgent messages of encouragement, running simulations of mobility to remind her psyche of the freedom that still existed within her consciousness.
That is so powerful.
She was practicing the feeling of movement in the dream dimension to try and break the psychological gridlock that was holding her physical body captive.
And it wasn't just during the extreme crisis of her hospitalization that she used this, right? The texts detail how she actively incubated dreams for practical waking world problems, too.
Constantly. Before high-stakes events, such as difficult, confrontational conversations with her publishers or highly stressful public appearances where she knew she would be scrutinized, she would deliberately incubate dreams about the event.
Okay, so the mechanism of this incubation is important. What exactly did she do?
She would set a firm, conscious intention before sleep to work through the upcoming challenge. She essentially handed the problem over to the inner self, asking for a simulation to be run.
How did the ego respond to that? Because My ego usually wants to stay awake until 3 a.m., worrying about the problem, running worst-case scenarios over and over.
Oh, the ego naturally resists. The ego believes it is the only part of you capable of solving problems, and it relies solely on physical data.
Right, it thinks it's the boss.
Exactly. Jean had to consciously bypass that resistance by trusting the broader inner self. And when she did, the results were remarkable. She often found that her dream rehearsals smoothed the waking experience entirely.
So it actually worked for her.
By the time the physical event occurred, the tense meeting with the publisher or the public appearance, she felt deeply prepared.
Because she had already done it.
She was significantly more confident because she had already navigated the emotional terrain in her sleep. She had already encountered the probable pitfalls, the difficult questions, the aggressive pushback, and her dreaming consciousness had already formulated the solutions.
It is the ultimate life hack. I mean, the heavy lifting, the emotional labor of the conflict was already done in the simulation.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just used for overcoming anxiety or conflict resolution either. She utilized this nightly laboratory for pure creativity, too.
Yes, the creative applications are profound.
The notes in the books describe how she would literally pull breakthroughs from her dreams. She would incubate a question about a concept for her books or a structural problem with her poetry, and the dream state would provide the answer.
Yes, there's a poem mentioned in the material called Echo, which perfectly captures this process of pulling art from the unconscious.
Right. She treated the dream state exactly as Seth defined it. The laboratory of the personality.
The phrase laboratory of the personality is vital because it explains how the creative function operates.
How so?
Seth emphasizes that it is impossible to study dreams objectively by isolating the dreamer from their own personality, which is what classical science often attempts to do.
They try to be too clinical about it.
Right. They try to treat dreams as purely mechanical biological reflexes. But Seth argues the only true laboratory is the subjective self. Jane proved this.
But she was living it.
She would ask for solutions before sleep, and the dream state would provide a rich, multi-dimensional bed of creativity. Spread out before her in the dream, she would find not only the problems, but the answers, often coded in highly personal, beautiful symbolism.
And then she would wake up and write it down.
She would literally transcribe the poetry or the concepts her inner self had engineered during the night.
See, if Jane Roberts could utilize this in the middle of a severe physical crisis and pull books and poetry from the simulation, the obvious question for you listening is, how do I do it?
Exactly. How do we apply it?
If we all have the keys to this nightly training facility, how do I actually unlock the door tonight? Because the theory sounds incredible, just incubate a dream. But practically speaking, I know exactly what happens to me.
What happened?
The alarm goes off, I blindly hit the snooze button, I start thinking about my inbox, and within 5 seconds, the entire 8 hours of simulation data vanishes.
It just disappears.
Poof, gone.
Yeah.
How do we bridge the gap between the laboratory and the waking ego?
The loss of the dream upon waking is the most common hurdle, and the Seth material provides a very specific psychological explanation for why it happens, along with a technique to overcome it.
Okay, I'm taking notes.
We can conceptualize the technique as the dream rehearsal check. The instruction is deceptively simple, but it requires discipline.
I can do discipline. What's the check?
Upon waking tomorrow morning, before you even move your physical body out of bed, before you look at your phone, before you let the demands of the waking day rush into your mind, you ask yourself one single question.
Which is?
What was I practicing last night?
What was I practicing last night? I want to highlight the framing of that question because it completely changes the relationship to the dream.
It shifts everything.
You aren't asking, what weird, surreal movie did my brain just play? You are specifically framing the memory as practice. It changes the lens through which you view the lingering feelings.
That's the key.
It's the difference between walking out of a confusing movie theater versus sitting in the locker room after a rigorous training session and looking over your playbook to see what drills the coach had you running.
The locker room analogy is perfectly aligned with Seth's framework. You are reviewing the playbook. But the crucial step here is capturing the data immediately, and you have to understand why speed is so important.
Why is speed so critical?
The text emphasizes that physical reality is a rock to which the ego clings. Yes. The ego, your waking conscious self, is heavily invested in physical survival and physical rules. It often sees no practical reason to remember dreams.
It thinks they're useless.
It views them as irrelevant to the physical day, and on general principles, it actively attempts to repress them as soon as you wake up.
The ego is basically a bouncer at the door of consciousness, tossing out the dream data because it doesn't fit the physical rulebook.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. So you have to bypass the bouncer.
Ow.
You keep a notebook by the bed, and you write down any dream fragments, any lingering emotional feelings, or any recurring themes the absolute second you wake up before the ego fully locks into physical focus.
But what if I don't have a narrative?
Yeah.
What if I'm someone listening right now who says, I just don't dream? Or I only wake up with a vague sense of anxiety or a color or just a feeling of triumph? Does that still count as data?
It absolutely counts.
Because the material points out that dreams are like the tail end of a comet. We only see the flash of their disappearance as they strike our mental atmosphere and explode into recognizable images.
Everyone dreams. If you think you don't dream, it is simply a recall issue. The ego's bouncer is just very efficient.
Right.
And yes, even a fragment is vital data. If you only remember the color red or a feeling of heavy frustration, you write it down. If you don't catch that comet's flash immediately, it burns up in the atmosphere of the waking day.
So write down whatever you have.
Yes. Now, once you have captured the data, there is a golden rule that Seth stresses repeatedly, and it goes against almost everything we are taught about dream analysis.
Oh, what is it?
Do not overinterpret.
Do not overinterpret.
Avoid getting bogged down in complex psychoanalysis and entirely discard the use of universal dream dictionaries.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because there is nothing more frustrating than waking up from a complex dream where, my teeth are falling out while I'm driving a bus and trying to Google what that universally means.
It never really helps.
No, it always feels like horoscopes.
Yeah.
So vague it could apply to anyone.
It feels vague because universal dream symbolism is fundamentally flawed according to this framework. Seth is adamant that there is no such thing as an overall statement of dream symbolism.
Okay, then what are symbols?
The symbols are manufactured products created by your specific inner self for your specific ego. To use an example, a dog might represent joy, loyalty, and freedom to you based on your childhood.
Right, because I grew up with golden retrievers.
Exactly. But if I recently witnessed a dog attacking someone, a dog in my dream represents sudden terror and loss of control.
That makes no sense.
If we both try to force our dreams into a universal dictionary that says dog equals friendship, we strip the simulation of its actual functional meaning. Your symbols are your own.
So what's the point of looking at them?
The goal of the Dream Rehearsal Check is not to decode a secret esoteric message. The goal is to notice the underlying psychological pattern.
Just noticing the pattern.
Yeah.
So I don't analyze the set dressing, I analyze the action. If I wake up and I remember feeling incredibly frustrated because I was trying to find my way out of a labyrinthine office building, I don't need to analyze the architecture of the building or why it was an office instead of a house.
The setting doesn't matter.
I just need to say, I was practicing dealing with frustration. I was practicing the feeling of being trapped and trying to problem solve my way out. That's the playbook I am reviewing.
You are identifying the psychological muscle you are exercising. The setting is just the rendering engine's backdrop. The muscle is the point of the simulation.
I love that.
And to help you listening really solidify this practice and move it from theory into habit, we can distill these teachings into a concrete, practical exercise.
Yes, let's give them some homework.
Let's call it the 3-day pattern challenge.
I am completely in for this. I love taking these massive metaphysical concepts and turning them into actionable steps. What is the challenge? Walk me through the exact steps.
It requires a commitment for the next 3 mornings. For 3 days, you dedicate yourself entirely to the Dream Rehearsal Check.
Okay, 3 days.
You place a simple log or notebook by your bed tonight. Tomorrow morning, the moment you wake up, you use this exact template. Last night, I practiced blank. You fill in the blank with the theme, the feeling, or the psychological muscle.
So day 1, let's say I wake up from a dream where my car brakes fail. Instead of panicking about my actual car, I write, last night I practiced dealing with a sudden loss of control.
Perfect.
Day 2, I dream I am trying to yell at someone but no sound comes out. I write, last night I practiced the feeling of not being heard or struggling to assert my voice.
Yes, exactly.
Day 3, I dream I am meticulously organizing a massive library of books. I write, last night I practiced creating order out of chaos.
Those are perfect examples of extracting the practice from the symbolism. You do this for 3 days. You don't try to change the dreams. You don't judge them. You simply log the data from the laboratory.
And what happens on day 4? Once I have this data, how does it actually change my waking life?
At the end of the 3 days, you step back and review the log to spot the overarching pattern. You look at the data you've collected. And then you ask yourself the central guiding question of this entire framework.
Which is,
What is my inner self preparing me for?
what is my inner self preparing me for? That question reframes the entire timeline of my life.
It really does.
It implies that my inner self is already looking ahead, seeing the probable futures, and getting me ready. If I look at that hypothetical 3-day log loss of control, struggling to be heard, creating order out of chaos, and I look at my upcoming waking week, I might realize, okay, there is a major restructuring happening at my company this week.
Yeah.
I've been dreading it, but my subconscious is literally trying to equip me for it. It's running me through the emotional drill so I won't be blindsided.
It empowers you entirely. It removes the victim mentality that we often carry into our waking challenges. It makes you realize that you are never entering your waking conflicts empty-handed.
You've already practiced.
You are already equipped with the subconscious training you need. Seth uses a beautiful foundational term in the text: value fulfillment.
Value fulfillment.
It is the idea that all life, every consciousness, inherently seeks to fulfill its greatest potentials, to add to the quality of existence itself. It isn't just about survival, it is about flourishing.
So the dreams are pushing us to flourish.
Yes. Your dreams are the primary mechanism by which your inner self drives you toward your own unique value fulfillment. The inner self is constantly working to ensure you have the psychological tools necessary to fulfill your potential.
Value fulfillment. It changes the narrative from I am struggling through a random universe to I am actively participating in my own growth across multiple states of consciousness.
Which is a profound realization.
It is. It is like you are being handed the keys to this nightly magical training facility. I honestly feel a profound sense of empowerment looking at sleep this way.
Me too.
It completely eradicates the idea of lost time. When I close my eyes tonight, I am not entering a void where I am just turning off for 8 hours. I am stepping into a massive strategic advantage. It is the hidden workshop where the raw material of my waking life is actually being forged.
And we have truly only scratched the surface of what the Seth material offers on this subject.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because once you learn to recognize what you are practicing, once you establish that line of communication with the inner self through the daily log, the next evolutionary step is learning to actively direct the practice.
Which sounds incredible.
Next time, we are going to dive into the exact mechanics of how to program your dreams deliberately. We will explore Seth's specific sleep suggestions for accelerating physical healing, for unlocking specific creative bottlenecks, and for receiving direct, actionable guidance from the inner self.
I cannot wait for that discussion. Deliberate dream programming is going to take this to a whole new level. But before we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final, incredibly provocative thought from the source material that I want to leave everyone with.
What's that?
It is something to mull over tonight as you drift off to sleep. Seth states that not only are we doing this rehearsal individually, rendering our own personal sandboxes, but we are also doing it collectively.
Ah, yes. The mass dreams.
The text introduces the concept of mass shared dreams. So consider the implications of this. If we are all rehearsing our individual futures in our dreams every single night, what happens when we share our waking world?
That's a staggering thought.
Are our nightly training facilities secretly connected? Are we in the uncharted depths of our sleep, collaboratively rehearsing, debating, and negotiating the exact physical reality that we all wake up to experience together?